In the vast plains of Okavango Wildlife Reserve in Botswana, there lived an elderly man named Jonas Mbele, a former ranger who had dedicated more than 5 decades of his life to protecting Africa's precious wildlife. Now in his late 70s, Jonas was no ordinary man. He was a living legend. From the time he was a young scout until his final years in uniform, his name became synonymous with integrity, bravery, and unwavering compassion for wild creatures. Lions, elephants, giraffes, rhinos, all were under his silent guardianship. Even after officially retiring, Jonas refused to stay idle. Each morning, despite the stiffness in his joints and the weight of age, he climbed into his rusted old Land Rover and drove deep into the reserve to patrol the grounds. His body might have slowed down, but his heart burned with the same fire as it had when he first began. Younger rangers often sought his advice. They admired not just his knowledge but the way he carried himself, with quiet dignity and a deep, instinctual connection to the land. He knew every trail, every animal by sight, and even the subtle changes in the wind. To many, Jonas wasn't just a man, he was part of the reserve itself, like the ancient baobab trees or the roaming herds. And though his steps grew slower, his presence remained the soul of Okavango. His legacy was not carved in stone, but etched in every life he had ever touched, both human and animal. The sun blazed mercilessly over the Okavango Wildlife Reserve, with the temperature climbing to a brutal 45 degrees Celsius. But Jonas Mbele, as always, refused to let the heat deter him. That morning, he insisted on driving out to check on a wounded rhino recovering in a remote patch of bushland. He'd cared for that rhino like it was family. The drive was slow and jarring, the Land Rover rattling over cracked earth. Sweat soaked through his shirt, his hands trembled slightly on the wheel, but he pressed on. When he finally reached the clearing, Jonas stepped out and approached the animal gently. Just as he knelt beside it, his chest seized with a sharp, crushing pain. His breath hitched. The world spun. Clutching his chest, he collapsed into the tall grass beside the creature he came to protect. Elijah and Musa, his young colleagues tending to zebras nearby, heard a distant cry. They rushed over to find Jonas unconscious, his face pale, lips trembling. Musa searched frantically for heart medication. Jonas had forgotten it. Elijah called for emergency support. The ambulance arrived, sirens piercing the dry air, but it was too late. On the ride to the station, Jonas's breathing faded, and his eyes closed for the final time. The reserve had just lost its heart. The following morning, the Okavango Reserve fell silent under a soft, amber sky. As per Jonas Mbele's final wish, his funeral was held in the heart of the land he had given his life to, beneath the old acacia tree near the eastern ridge. Rangers, veterinarians, village elders, and conservation staff gathered in solemn rows. They laid his body on a hand-carved wooden platform, wrapped in a simple woven cloth. No caskets, no grand speeches, just the wind moving through the grass and the distant call of a fish-eagle overhead. His old boots were placed by his side, dusty and worn from decades of service. Elijah stood close, his hand trembling as he gently brushed Jonas's shoulder. "You were the soul of this land," he whispered, voice breaking. Musa lit incense, bowing his head, while others quietly offered wildflowers or said prayers in their native tongue. There wasn't a dry eye among them. For many, Jonas wasn't just a mentor, he was a living compass, a man whose heart beat with the rhythm of the wild. And in that moment, as the sun climbed over the grasslands, everyone felt the enormity of the loss. A silence heavier than words fell across the reserve. Jonas Mbele, the man who had walked every trail, who knew every call of every creature, had become one with the land he loved. His legacy wouldn't be marked by monuments, but by every life he touched, every animal he saved, and every ranger he inspired. Just as the final prayers were being whispered, a low, resonant roar echoed across the Okavango plains, startling but not threatening. Heads turned. From beyond the acacia grove, a massive male lion slowly emerged, his golden coat dulled with age and a deep scar etched across his left flank. The rangers instinctively tensed, but Elijah raised a hand, signaling them to stay calm. There was no aggression in the lion's stride, only solemnity. The lion walked straight through the crowd, the humans parting in stunned silence. He reached the wooden platform where Jonas lay, then circled it once, his eyes unreadable but heavy with something ancient and knowing. He lowered his head, pressing his forehead gently to the ground at the foot of the platform. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. Elijah's eyes welled with tears as he recognized the scar. "It's him," he whispered to Musa. 15 years ago, that snare trap. We saved him. Jonas and I." His voice cracked. The lion stayed motionless for nearly a minute. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, he backed away, pausing only once to look at Jonas's body one last time, a farewell that needed no words. The moment was surreal, as if nature itself had come to honor the man who had devoted his life to protecting it. Even the wind seemed to still. In the eyes of all who witnessed it, that lion's gesture became the most heartfelt eulogy of the day, a silent roar of gratitude that would echo for generations. The sun hovered low on the horizon as Jonas Mbele's simple wooden casket was carried slowly across the grassland, its path flanked by fellow rangers, villagers, and conservationists. They moved silently, reverently, to the shade of the great baobab tree, Jonas's favorite resting spot during his daily patrols. The tree stood tall like a guardian, its branches spreading wide over the land he had protected for more than half a century. When they laid him to rest in the soft earth beneath the tree, the scarred lion followed, just steps behind. The air was still, heavy with mourning. As the final clumps of soil fell onto the grave, the lion let out a long guttural roar, not of rage but of loss. The sound echoed across the plains, raw and full of pain. Then, without command or coaxing, the lion lay down beside the grave, his body low, his head resting in the grass, eyes never leaving the mound of earth. No one dared move. Tears streamed silently down the faces of those watching, many clutching their hearts at the overwhelming emotion of the moment. A beast of the wild, untamed and free, now stood in solemn tribute to the only man it had ever trusted. Even as the crowd dispersed, the lion remained. 4 hours he stayed at the grave, keeping watch as the sky darkened into twilight. That image, of a lion mourning his guardian, etched itself into every soul present. A legend was gone, but his spirit lived on in the wild he loved, and in the heart of the lion who never forgot. The day after the funeral, the Okavango Wildlife Reserve stood still. All patrols, tours, and operations paused. Staff gathered quietly, laying wildflowers at the base of Jonas Mbele's grave. The scarred lion came again at dawn, his massive frame silhouetted against the soft orange sky. He approached the grave in silence, sat beside it, and bowed his head for a long time as if in silent prayer. No one disturbed him. Respect bridged the gap between species, for the bond he shared with Jonas transcended language or instinct. Over the following weeks, Elijah and Musa returned often. Sometimes they found the lion already there, always alone, always watchful. The story of Jonas and the lion rippled through the region, becoming more than a tale. It became a symbol of honor, legacy, and trust hard-earned over time. Today, Elijah and Musa lead with the same compassion Jonas taught them. They remind new rangers that conservation isn't just about protecting animals, but honoring the balance between man and nature. The lion, too, became part of that legacy, a living embodiment of gratitude and memory. In a world where people often forget the past, this story urges us to remember, to protect what matters, to act with kindness even when it's hard. Because sometimes the most meaningful relationships come not through words, but through shared struggle, silent loyalty, and one final roar for the ones who loved us most. Let this be a reminder: true legacy is not measured in power, but in how deeply we are remembered, and who returns when we are gone.